This is Andrew with Missing Remote, and this is a new computer. Actually, this is a box, but inside of it are the components that will make up my new workstation. It's been a long time since I've built a workstation. I've just been kind of using the one that I have had for quite a few years, but I decided it was time recently. The other one's pretty old. But I haven't even built a computer in a long time, because even for home theater stuff, I've just been using the Nooks, because there hasn't been really a reason to use something that was more powerful than that. What makes this one particularly interesting is that for the first time in ages, I am using an AMD CPU and platform, obviously. I had sworn off AMD for a variety of reasons, but recently they've come back and been a lot more competitive, and so both on the price and performance and reliability, or at least from what I've read, reliability, which was the major reason why I stopped using them years ago. And I opted for the Ryzen 3700X, which is an 8-core, 16-thread processor, 4.4 gigahertz max boost, but the base core is 3.6. And one thing that isn't entirely obvious, unless you follow it, is that, you can look here, is that you do need a discrete graphics card with this CPU. Not that that's a problem, just something that you want to be aware of when you're ordering all the kit, because motherboard actually has, some of the Ryzen CPUs have an IGP, and so the motherboard has HDMI DisplayPort built into it, but obviously I won't be using that because I have a discrete card. For the motherboard, I went with the Asrock X570M Pro4 for the reason that there are only two Micro-ATX motherboards that use the 570 chipset. Sorry, X570 chipset. And this is the only one that has an Intel network adapter on it. So, it was pretty obvious which one to choose. Price is reasonable, feature set should be really nice, and it has all of the expansion that I need, including 4 DIMM slots, although I won't be using 4 DIMM slots quite yet. So that's this one. And the graphics card is a Zotac 6GB 1660 card. These are pretty substitutable. This is just the one that was had a reasonable feature set for a reasonable price on Newegg. The RAM, 32 gigabytes of DDR4. This is the 3600, but I might run it at 3200. I'm not sure how all that works. When it is in 3600, the latency is a little bit higher. It's 18. You can get 16, which is probably a little. I'm going to play around with it to see which one is faster. I was planning to get 16 gigabytes, but Newegg ran a sale the day I bought it, where this was, I don't know, $40 more. So basically double the RAM for $40. And then for storage, this is an Intel, should be anyway, an Intel 7 series SSD, 760p, 2 terabyte. The 6 series or 660p is quite a bit more cost effective, but it is a little bit slower, or a lot slower depending on the workload. And this is going to be my workstation for work, and I just want to make sure that I'm not I/O limited. So I went with this. I generally prefer Intel or Samsung SSDs because of their reliability, both perceived and my personal experience. So that's pretty much all there is to getting the kit out of the box, and it will all be going into this fractal design Micro-ATX chassis, and I'm just going to go ahead and build it up. One thing to note about this motherboard, and I read the manual, sorry, beforehand, is you want to populate A2 and B2 first instead of A1 and B1, which is something that varies between motherboards, since I only have 2 DIMMs. So it's just something you want to check to make sure that if you're running dual channel, that you populate them in the order that they suggest. So one of the interesting things about this motherboard is that it has 2 M2 slots. One of them is here, and the other one is right there. So you have to take this thing off, which is that M2 heatsink, to cool it down, or keep it cool. All right, so that is our PC built. Now I'm going to go connect it to a monitor, update the BIOS, and then install the operating system.
So I thought we would start with the bad stuff and then work ourselves to the good stuff. And the first bad thing, although this is more of an annoyance, is that the Wraith Prism cooler that comes with the 3700X CPU is pretty loud, and it's bright, and it doesn't work very well. And there are a variety of reasons around this, and as a spoiler, I ended up replacing it with something else, but that's a topic for a different video. Just know that you probably will want to as well, because it's kind of rubbish. The major problem with the system, and this is specific to the board, the Asrock X570M Pro4, but probably impacts other X570 boards with Intel network cards, maybe from other vendors, but probably from Asrock, or almost certainly from Asrock. It gets really horrible read performance when using SMB with a Windows file server. I haven't been able to figure out why, but I did test it with a wide variety of other network cards or network adapters in this system. So it is specific to this configuration where it could be an integrated NIC. I don't have a discrete Intel NIC, but I did test other discrete NICs with it. But more importantly, Asrock refuses to acknowledge the problem. When I contacted them, noting that, first I used their support form on their website, which doesn't work, so I ended up calling them, and then it was basically a process of blaming me, blaming the network, blaming the cables, blaming the file server, refusing to do any legwork, not wanting to look into the issue after I did all of the work to narrow it down basically to Windows Server, SMB, read performance. I handed that to them, and I haven't heard anything beyond. The last thing I got from them was that they wanted me to buy 2 other X570 systems in order to validate the problem, and I'm just not going to do that. It's not worth the effort, and frankly, with so little differentiation between motherboards, there's really no reason why I think I would ever buy an Asrock system again, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it, because you're on your own. There is no support. Beyond the RMA, their support's useless. And while that is harsh, I think it is completely true. Power consumption isn't really an issue, more a thing to be aware of. I had expected it to be lower given modernity, and experience with Intel systems where the the idle power is generally well below the TDP of the CPU, but in this case the idle power consumption was about 74 watts, which is actually higher than the TDP, which was surprising. It does spin up power quite quickly, so you want to spec for that. The highest I saw was about 180, but the average is more like 175, either doing a CPU encoding, multi-threaded CPU encoding, or using Prime 95, which is kind of like hammers the whole system. The flip side to power consumption, or at least peak power consumption, is generally realized in CPU performance. And here we can see an example with a Handbrake CPU transcoding test where the AMD Ryzen 3700X is compared against an Intel Core i7 4770K, the system that it replaced, in transcoding a 480i and 1080i file into an MKV format. This roughly tests multi-threaded CPU performance, and we can see here that it just gets destroyed. Most of this is expected because there are twice the logical and physical cores, but we can see that it's more than twice in both cases. So there's clearly some IPC improvements here as well, which is also expected given the 6-year or so improvement in process and basic CPU technology. You can probably tell we're getting the good stuff here now, and here's an example of a great thing, which is that the board has 2 M2 NVMe slots, which is fantastic. Here's performance of the Intel 760p SSD that's in the thing, and it's fast, blazing fast, and being able to throw another one of those things in there at some point in time is awesome. And I love it. Another great thing is that the BIOS updates are really easy. You just throw a FAT32 USB stick into the back of the board, go into BIOS, and you can update it straight from there. You don't need to do like a DOS disk or anything like that. There isn't very much that you can do to play around in the BIOS. I'll link out to a video I did showing kind of a walkthrough, but it's super boring, so I didn't want to include it here. But unfortunately, there's no way to turn off or control how the LED behaves in S3 or standby. So it just blinks. And it's not a big deal because this is a workstation, sits in the office, but if this was intended as a home theater PC, then that would be a massive problem. Stability is another good thing. Obviously, that's super important. I didn't overclock this system, so I didn't test that bit, but I have had motherboards in the past where the thing is just not stable out of the box, and obviously that's not acceptable either from a workstation or, well, maybe if you're gaming and overclocking and all that stuff, you can deal with it, but certainly not something that I want to deal with. So that's a good thing. I also think that the price is reasonable for this board for what it is, ignoring the support structure from Asrock, which is, again, terrible. And there's always like a rebate or something. So if you want to save the $10, you can save the $10. I'm not going to include the price here right now because every time I look at it, it's $10 less, and that kind of hurts me. But it's great for you if you decide to go ahead and grab one. That said, I wouldn't buy the board again. I would probably look at getting a bigger case so that I could get a full ATX motherboard in the system and build it up that way around some other vendor's motherboard, knowing what I know now. Obviously, it's kind of a hassle to turn the thing back in and do the return process and then end up having to like do all that again. So I'm not going to. I have another solution to work around the problem that I'm having with the Intel NIC that's built into the board. An easy solution to that is just to use a USB NIC, which works just as well, or almost as well as an Intel one should. And I validated that, and it's actually part of the troubleshooting process that I went through with Asrock. But my workaround is both more performant and more permanent than that. But that's probably a different video. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments about the system, please leave them below. I will do my best to respond as quickly as I can. Thanks.